In life, you have to take the pace that love goes. You don't force it. You don't just force love. You don't force falling in love. You don't force being in love. You just become. Juan Pablo. The best way to control the uncontrollable, which is my definition of pace, by the way, in public speaking, is to first understand how you already speak and recommunicating how you want to speak naturally in a way that's comfortable for you. A very difficult subject, I must admit. And that's exactly why in this week's episode of Master Talk, we're covering pace and how to conquer it. Hi everyone, I hope you're having a fantastic week. Brendan from Master Talk here, your go-to channel to mastering your talk. And on this week's episode of Master Talk, we're covering pace and how to conquer it. So let's get into it. If there's one thing that you take away from this video, it is the following. Everyone is comfortable at different levels and different speeds in how they speak. And much like love or life, the best way to think about pace is by thinking about how you want to speak in a way that's comfortable to you and your audience. Much like in love or life, where you want to find a healthy balance that works for you and everyone else around you. So let's get into it. Number one, fix inconsistencies between your speaking voice, how you naturally speak, and your presentation voice. Here's the biggest mistake I see with most speakers. When I coach students or clients, what I generally see is there's a big gap between how you want to speak naturally and how you actually speak in presentation. And here's a common example of that. Students generally speak a lot faster in the majority of cases in presentations than, let's say, if I grabbed a lunch or a coffee with them. So if they're having lunch or coffee with me, everything's very relaxed. The setting's very relaxing. They're talking about their day. They're very happy. They're very excited. They're happy to be there. But in presentations, the conditioning, generally speaking, of course, I don't want to generalize for everyone, is you don't want to really be there. You want to get in the presentation and you want to get out as quickly as possible. So because of that, there's a misalignment between how you naturally speak and how you actually present. And the first step to mastering pace is aligning both of those speeds so that you have the same speed. Another thing I want to admit is, for me, it's very different because since I've practiced pace so many times in my life, I can speak at any different speed and any length of speed and how low or slow I want to go, and you'll still understand me and I can still inspire people at different paces and different speeds. But for beginners, given that pace in general is a very vague subject and it's not very well understood, my number one tip for you is to first start by aligning both of your speaking speeds and your presentation speed. Another caveat I want to put out there is a lot of speaking coaches talk about speaking slower. I don't think that applies for everybody. That's why I don't think it's very good advice. What I naturally recommend is an alignment between how you already speak and how you want to speak. That's the focus. So if you already speak really slowly, then the opposite needs to come to life. You need to speak a bit more faster if you want to speak in a way that your audience will understand you. In other words, align both of those speaking speeds. That's number one. So find those inconsistencies and fix them. Number two, have the worst critics in the room comment on whether or not your presentation voice should be your speaking voice. So what generally happens at this point, if you're able to align both voices, essentially, so let me do this again, how you present and how you speak in a coffee shop or at a pizzeria or at different areas of life. Once those voices are aligned, by the way, you're going to be in a very small fraction of public speakers because most speakers, even the best ones, don't actually practice pace that much. So once you're at this level, now the next question you need to ask yourself is whether or not this way I speak is comfortable for my audience, whether I'm speaking too fast or speaking too slow. Most individuals, in most cases I've seen, it's always been a transition from fast to slow. Because once you're able to go from fast to slow, it's going to be much easier for you to become a world-class speaker because world-class speakers can pace at any level, really quickly or really slowly or normal speed. So going from fast to slow essentially increases your tool set. It makes you better at pace. The opposite is even more easier. So if you already speak very, very, very slowly, then mastering pace is even easier Because all you need to do is take a pitch or a speech that you want to do, write it out in full, and just practice speaking to it faster. So let's say Jill goes on the hill, she finds a bucket of water, then as you pronounce that word over and over again, the sentence, you're going to say something like, Jill runs up the hill, Jill grabs a bucket of water. So in that scenario, you're practicing pace in a way that either makes you faster or makes you slower. But in either situation, you're improving your arsenal. You're improving the way and the spectrum and how you speak from slow to fast to medium speed. I know this is all very complicated, but keep going with me as we're going about this. So like I said, just to recap so far, the first part about pace is aligning both your speaking speed and your presentation speed. So once those two elements are aligned, you're going to be a way better speaker and you're going to be able to control pace at a way that's comfortable for you. Then the second tip is focusing on the worst critics in the room. So once you've aligned both of those speaking speeds, then you can readjust that speed based on the message that you want to communicate to your audience and based on what your audience is comfortable with. So for example, in my case, in most of my keynotes, I present with all three paces. So a very quick tone, a very slow tone, and a normal speaking tone. So once you get really good at it, you can vary your tone. The third thing, and the last thing that I want to go over with pace for today, is acknowledging the fact that your pace is going to vary based on the time that you have in the presentation, your audience, as well as how you want to present the content in your presentation. So like I said, the time limit that you have, how your audience perceives you and who they are essentially, and what content you want to get out in the presentation within that specific time frame. So I'll give you an example. Let's say I'm an English speaker and I'm presenting to an audience whose English is not their strong suit. So English is not their first language, essentially. I'm going to be heavily incentivized to use very low pace, right? Very slower pace, even if I want to talk quicker. But in most keynotes that I give on public speaking, to use that specific example, I actually pace very quickly. And the reason I do that, specifically in areas where I have little time, so let's say 30 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes to give a keynote, is because I know, since my goal of the presentation is A, to convince my audience that public speaking is something anyone can learn, and B, to watch my YouTube videos, I need to present enough content in the keynote so that they're convinced I'm very knowledgeable, and B, they want to watch my videos. So even if I have less time, I'm still going to quicken up the pace a bit more because my pronunciation is very good and I'm going to get through the content really quickly if I don't have that much time. But the point I want to drive here is that's not the right thing to do, but rather a personal thing I've chosen to do. So if you believe based on your content that you're better off saying less, that will be more impactful, by all means go for it. It's just in my specific keynotes, given that I give out 5 tips and I can present that same keynote in as little as 20 minutes to as much as an hour, I always want to make sure I get through my 5 tips so that people are incentivized to watch my videos, which is the goal of my keynotes for the most part, besides them learning about public speaking. So all of this to say is pace is a very difficult subject to master, and I'm sure you're probably very confused so far about the video and what's happening with the content. But the thing I want to drive forward with you is that if you're able to master pace, you will be dangerously good at public speaking. And that's because very, very few people can master pace at a level I have, or very few speakers in the world have. So just to recap once again, realign your speaking voice with the speaking voice that you use whenever you're at a pizzeria, whenever you're at a coffee shop, whenever you're having an intimate conversation with someone. Then after you've aligned those two, determine whether or not they should be your speaking voice, that voice that you've aligned. And then with the new spectrum that you have in pace, now that you can pace at different speeds, the third thing now, once you've mastered it, is figuring out the best pace for your specific presentation, because in my case, it changes all the time. Super technical video. I totally get it. Keep rewatching it if you need to, so that one day you'll be able to master pace and be 100 steps closer to mastering your talk. As always, if you enjoyed this week's episode of MasterTalk, be sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the YouTube channel as well to see more videos like this. And as always, if there's one thing that you take away from this video, it's this. Pace is a very difficult subject, but if you're able to pace at different speeds, at different levels, in a way that's comfortable to you, you will also make your audience comfortable in general. Take care, everyone. Have a fantastic week, and be sure to send this video to someone that needs it as well. Take care. Bye-bye.